All right, today we have another episode from the archives with one of my incredible guests. Enjoy. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who've experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I'm very excited to have today Loch Kelly. Loch, welcome.
Thank you so much, guys. Great to be here.
All right. So Loch has a master's in divinity. He's a licensed clinical social worker, as well as an author. He's a recognized leader in the field of meditation. Loch is the founder of the nonprofit Open-Hearted Awareness Institute. He's worked in community mental health, established homeless shelters, and counseled family members of 9/11. So Loch is the author of the book, The Way of Effortless Mindfulness, A Revolutionary Guide for Living an Awakened Life, a book which actually Dr. Richard Schwartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems, says brilliantly weaves together meditation, neuroscience, and psychotherapy to truly support a compassionate awakening. All right, Loch, obviously that's just a bit about you. I know we'll get into everything, but do give our listeners, well, first off, tell our listeners where you're from and where you're calling from, and then let's dive in.
Sure. So I'm calling from New York City. So, yeah. And, I did a joint degree, as you said, in psychology, spirituality, and social work, and worked in community mental health in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. So outpatient psych, inpatient psych, as well as private practice. So, from the beginning of my training 30 some years ago, I've been working with trauma and trying to see what heals and what helps.
Okay. So I want to hear a little bit about how you got into this. And I know we want to jump right in, but what talk a little bit about the interest in the joint degree in Master's in Divinity and Psychology, if you will.
Yeah, I think in some ways, as I look back, as many of us do, you kind of start to see that there's some things that happened in my childhood that opened me to something bigger than myself. Some sense for me, when I was playing sports, I kind of felt what's called the flow state, or being in the zone, and felt a kind of interconnectedness, a sense of bigger consciousness that wasn't just my small, smart self, that was kind of a loving sense of being that was bigger than my small self, and yet was essentially who I was. And I was just curious about what that was, who was looking at it, and kind of being in between kind of the hippies and the yuppies, graduating from college. I kind of combined the two. I was kind of stayed with the spirituality and the meditation, but then I brought in more of the yuppie, the science really, and said, well, I'm not interested in making this about religion. This is about consciousness and healing and reducing suffering. So what works? Who are the people throughout history who have found happiness, and who, what did they do? And so I traveled, both went to graduate school and went on a fellowship to Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal, and studied with teachers there and psychologists and local people working in social justice as well in those communities, doing more community healing on many levels. And so there was something holistic about it that I felt wasn't just the medical model and wasn't just our internal psychological body.
Okay, so you finish graduate school, you go on this fellowship, and you have these experiences. You come back and start private practice, or what?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination. I come back and I finish social work school and then go into community mental health. So for 5 years, I was working in Brooklyn Mental Health, outpatient mental health clinic in New York, with associated with a hospital and an outpatient clinic. And so, mostly Axis 1 diagnosed people who would come for psychotherapy. And so I started to work with them in a way that was kind of my version of mindfulness therapy, which was more parts-based psychotherapy, and was accessing not just kind of a mental mindfulness, which I call deliberate mindfulness, but what I had learned in Nepal from my Tibetan Buddhist teacher, which is kind of a sense of this open-hearted awareness, a sense of kind of loving presence that was, that's who we feel like we are when we're in our most supported, when we're with friends, when we're walking in nature, when we're connected with things we love, like gardening, or there's a sense that we drop this small neurotic self-referencing part of our brain, and we open into this more spacious and pervasive sense of self. And so I started to see whether people who were struggling with these Axis 1 issues could access that, and whether it would help. And they could, and it did.
So what does that look like? What is,
yeah,
get specific here, what that look, I know what that means conceptually and theoretically.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's kind of, it's very similar. It's very interesting when I was practicing and then after, doing community mental health and started doing some private practice and consulting at different Columbia University, and then doing more teaching of these workshops in meditation and combining the two. I developed a kind of system more clearly. And then my wife, who's a therapist, went about 10 years ago, she went off to a workshop with Dick Schwartz, who does internal family systems. And she came back and said, Loch, this guy does exactly what you do, except upside down. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, the whole parts-based thing and self is what you do, but he starts with parts and you start with self. So what I do is I literally, in some ways I start with where the person is feeling trauma, or where they're feeling contracted or identified, or what the problem is. I have them feel it in their body and locate it. And then I have them really feel a kind of kindness or gratitude for that part, for trying to get our attention and trying to be helpful, whether it's a kind of protective part or it's an exile who wants our attention. And then I ask that part if it can give some space. And then I have people open, and then I become interested in what is it like to be aware from this spacious awareness. And
so in other words, another part, in a sense, you're looking at.
Yes. So this is interesting, because this is what happens is that for many people, they go into a mindful witness, which is another part that is like an observing ego or a smart, compassionate, self-like part. But then the key is, can you notice that part and then open further to that which is already aware, that has a kind of spacious presence that isn't a part, it isn't located. So when I ask someone, where, how do you feel toward this part? They say, I feel loving. And then I say, well, where's the part located? And they can find it in their body. And I say, well, where's the boundary of you? And they literally say, well, there's no boundary. Where are you aware from? I'm aware from everywhere and here. Mm-hmm. And what does that feel like? Well, it feels free. It feels like I'm just me. So it's not kind of spaced out. It's not a psychedelic, trippy thing, but literally it's a very subtle, but when you access this feeling of kind of spacious, pervasive, open-hearted feeling of self, it has this natural capacity of love. It has a huger feeling of space is important, because now the traumatic energy and feelings that arise don't overwhelm the small egoic sense of self, they literally have more room to move. And there's more, almost like a larger supportive presence to be with whatever's arising, no matter how angry or terrified or upset. The experience of emotional unburdening from a part, there you're aware from not just another small part, but from this feeling of the, what people call their ground of being.
Mm-hmm. It feels to me like you're bringing an awareness to the cosmic awareness, in a sense?
Yeah, you could say that. And some people, it feels cosmic, or some people say it's universal or it's life itself. But others just feel, well, I don't know if it goes that far, but it's really big. It's really loving. Like, they don't go even to, let alone religion, they don't even go to, cosmic consciousness. They just go to, well, this is like me when I'm walking in nature, but now it's here when I'm feeling the most upset. And that's the difference, is it's like, oh, I thought I would have to go for a walk or sit and meditate to find this, but you're telling me it's here all the time, and that's essentially the feeling of who I am. And it is what, the wisdom traditions from around the world have called self, true nature, no self. They've called it, essential being. And it's what, when they've discovered this, they say, that's what awakening or freedom or, loving happiness is like.
So you're working, using this in a sense to work not just with trauma, but with
yes,
anything and everything. And is it correct to say, Loch, that in a sense you are helping people to kind of distinguish themselves from the trauma, if you will, or the anxiety, or the...
Yeah, so it's this interesting thing, because it is almost a separation, meaning it feels like it's completely taking your body over, and then you step away and become aware of it. So there's almost a disidentification or detachment. Then you realize, oh, it is just a part of me, but you don't diminish it or try to deny it or make it go away. You kind of find its right size. Like, well, okay, it's true, it's here, it's real, but it's not all of me, it's not the center of me, it's not where I'm aware from, it's what I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. So there's the big move. Then you're not in a detached witness, or you may be initially. Then the difference between what I call deliberate mindfulness or mindfulness-based therapy and this effortless mindfulness, or being aware from self-energy, is that the witnessing awareness is also has this loving energy and is almost interconnected and embodied. So it's both outside and within. So it's not re-identified, or but it's not a detached witness that is acting like your feelings are some distant experience, that is just coming and going, but it's a real juicy feeling from a bigger loving presence that's with the shame and the fear, and it's aware of it and talking to it and asking it, how do you feel, what's going on? And it can bear what seemed to be unbearable.
I just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Loch Kelly. He's the author of the book, The Way of Effortless Mindfulness, a revolutionary guide for living an awakened life. We'll have links here up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. All right, guys, this episode of the Trauma Therapist Podcast is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of amazing classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills, and they're offering you, Trauma Therapist Podcast listeners, 2 months for free. You can access that by going to Skillshare.com/trauma guy, Skillshare.com/trauma guy. You know, I talk a lot on this podcast about the importance of knowledge and educating yourself and self-awareness and personal growth. And you can start and even continue doing that through Skillshare. They have classes in lifestyle and productivity and marketing and creative writing and freelance and entrepreneurship. And one of the other things that really distinguishes them is that they're huge on creating community, which is something I'm really big on as well. I'm sure you can tell. Once you're in a course, for example, you can comment on the course, you can see what other people are commenting, how they're engaging, and you can engage and comment along with people who are sharing your same passions. A few of the classes I'm going through right now are creating a perfect morning routine, storytelling for leaders, how to craft stories that matter, discovering success, 7 exercises to uncover your purpose, passion, and path, and productivity with Evernote. So if you'd like to join me and the millions of other students already learning on Skillshare and also get 2 months for free, go to Skillshare.com/trauma guy. Again, go to Skillshare.com/trauma guy to start your 2 months now. All right, let's get back to Loch Kelly and my interview. And thanks so much. So you mentioned fear, you mentioned shame. It's one thing to talk about it like we're talking about it now, and I can imagine. I mean, this is pretty multi-layered stuff to when you're working with someone. What about when shame someone? I mean, and obviously, my guess is that this responds to the different types of trauma out there. Obviously, different people are different, but talk a little bit about the challenges that you might come up against when dealing with certain traumas or people's feelings and so forth.
Sure. I mean, first of all, it's just the acknowledgement of the whole parts-based system that we all have, is that we're not just one ego. We're not just one, well, I'm this way and I feel angry. No, I feel good. Now I feel bad. No, I feel good. They're literally which is about half of the therapies that are out there are parts-based therapies, including, you'd have to say, Freudian id, ego, and superego are really parts. So recognizing that there are, traumatized parts or exiled parts or childlike parts, and then there are these protective parts. And so one of the most difficult things in accessing this more sense of true nature or self with a capital S or loving presence is the protectors are saying, oh no, I'm not letting you out. Stay close, be contracted, and do not trust anybody who says that doing what we've always done is the only way. So that becomes like working with the protective parts to say, almost like, well, if I see you, I'm aware of you. If we could just open up to this love that you're looking for and come right back like a parent going to the kitchen to get some food and coming back, would you be willing to give it a try? And at first they may say no. And then eventually say, well, let's just check it out. Okay. Would you be willing to step back and just, watch and wait? And then when the awareness opens to this subtler, more dynamically, naturally compassionate self-energy, that protective part says, oh my God, you mean I don't have to be doing all this work by myself? And they'll start to unburden and allow more connection to those exiled, traumatized parts. So that's one of the, I think, key timing things, that it's not instant, but I found that, people, this is a natural capacity that is both healing to people who are, have had complex trauma, but also for people who are, have normal trauma, like all of us,
Right.
for most of us anyhow, it just makes our life so much more full, just accessing this dimension, which has been the goal of meditative traditions. And what I do is these small glimpses, these practices where it literally, with your eyes open, you learn to shift awareness. And that's the thing. I mean, listening to me describe this or any therapy sounds like it's a particular map and a particular method, but it's no more difficult than any map or method of any therapy. It's just particular. And yet, it literally is the map of awakening that has been shared through the wisdom traditions in all different cultures throughout time. So it's quite remarkable to see the results.
So when you say awakening, talk a little bit more about that, because when I hear that word, I probably wrongly think of an intense meditation practice that results hopefully after years in some kind of an awakening, but I realize that's not necessarily the case. But how you're bringing this into the discussion, what do you mean?
Yes. Yeah, so this is kind of bringing together East and West, the bringing together this word awakening, and basically what it means in a simple way is kind of upgrading your operating system from a small separate sense of self that's a thought-based loop where ego function becomes ego identity, and we start to literally feel like who we are is this looker that's in the middle of our head looking out of our eyes, and that small capacity is supposed to take care of all of our emotions and heal us and become smart enough. And that small sense of self cannot bear a fully intimate human emotional life. So the awakening is literally opening to realize there's a more spacious and inherent dimension of consciousness that isn't thought-based, that is literally pre-thought and wisdom mind. It's post-thought. There's a feeling of it being almost like a continuous intuition, or it's accessed when people go into a flow state. So in a flow state, people are doing optimal functioning of sports, of music, of active in their life, and they're not referencing thoughts. They feel like they have no ego problems. They feel interconnected with all the other people in the orchestra or the people on the sports field or their garden if they're gardening, and they feel dropped into their body more and more loving and sensitive, and yet more courageous capacity to be with who they are and what they're doing. And so we're just taking that flow feeling of this and bringing it to our parts so that we've awakened to an optimal way of living, which people have glimpses of throughout their life. But the awakening tradition says it's almost like a developmental stage that you can learn how to live from here.
Who would you say this book is for? Who's your target here?
I mean, in many ways, it's those who have had glimpses throughout their life of this kind of awakened consciousness and who longing for it. It's for therapists who are looking to help and are using, most for those who are using some parts-based system. So for a lot of IFS therapists and Gestalt therapists and psychosynthesis and other types of therapists, and then for those who literally just feel like, is that all there is? I've kind of tried. I'm smart. I tried hard. I got my ducks in a row, and either it didn't work out or it did work out. I get a lot of people. It did work out in New York City. They come and they're like, "Well, I won all the games. I got the money and the family and the health and that's it. I'm like miserable." Mm-hmm. So this is the real opportunity for literally people to, go to this next stage of human development for the good of themselves and for our culture.
So, as you're talking and you're talking about a clinical setting in a sense and working with a particular client, the question is, though, for me, and the curiosity, though, is the challenge or the demand for the clinician in a sense.
Yes.
Right. So this requires, I'm guessing, a certain amount of inner work. I mean, just as you explained, this is what this book is about, but
yes,
this requires of you to maintain a certain amount of awareness yourself, correct?
Yes. I mean, and I think, if I really, when I've talked to any group of therapists, they kind of are half doing it for their own good. In other words, and they're pretty high standards. In other words, they're really helping people. They've got a compassionate capacity, and they want to be living a fully intimate human life at the highest level. So this is for them. Because the more you have this capacity to awaken, the more you can give to your clients. And it's fairly simple. It's not any more complex than any method and map. A little example would be, working with somebody who's who is, impatient doing self-cutting, and just asking the client, so are you aware of a part of yourself that wants to hurt yourself? And the client would kind of be like, well, yeah. Well, where's that part? What do you mean where? Oh, well, can you find that part? And they say, well, yeah, it's right in my mask of my face and down my throat and to my belly. Okay. And now are you aware of a part that doesn't want to hurt yourself? And they're kind of standing there going, well, yeah, there's kind of a little, over on the one side of my body, there's kind of a little softness kind of part. And then I say, well, who's aware of those two parts? And they kind of go, oh, well, I am. Really? Well, where are you? Oh, I'm here. I'm everywhere. And literally that simple little, with somebody in complete distress, that simple technique shows them experientially that which they need to heal their trauma.
So by distancing themselves in a sense, by giving them a certain, or empowering them to be able to.
It's really like a consciousness thing. So it's not like you're not doing anything. You're literally, it's almost like consciousness. I mean, it's the way, this habit of constellating our consciousness in this thought-based lookers and these parts, and you're dropping into a subtler, more open and witnessing dimension, which is always here, but we're just closed down and doing this self-referencing, which is what the neuroscience, I go to a bunch of neuroscience, and you can see in the fMRI how the brain changes by opening to this awareness, which feels equally inside and out, which is kind of the unusual thing. But everyone knows, when I ask people, all right, what do you do for fun? What do you do in your life that, gives you joy? And they'll say gardening, walking in nature. So then what is it that you feel when you are enjoying that? And literally, if you look at it, it's this. Mm-hmm. They shift their consciousness into an interconnected, loving, peaceful feeling of being themselves that's not a thought-based, that's not a part-based, but can be while they're walking in nature, they could be, thinking about what's going on with their family members, but they're doing it from a bigger capacity, a sense of true nature, or, that feeling of being.
Wow. All right. Once again, the book is The Way of Effortless Mindfulness, a revolutionary guide for living an awakened life. Again, we'll have this linked up. All right, Loch, how about any go-to book recommendations that you have, whether trauma related or not, or mindfulness related or not, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, besides my book, which is The Way of Effortless Mindfulness, yeah, I mean, I do like books by Dick Schwartz. So, the basic book on internal family systems.
Okay, have that.
Is my first book that I would recommend, and it basically gives a model of what I'm talking about. It doesn't go as much into self. So Dick Schwartz and I have taught these workshops together, 5-day workshops in Italy and Esalen and in New York, and done an online course where I bring more distinguishing what a self is, and he brings, distinguishing the map of the parts within. And so that book would probably be the best.
Awesome. Okay. And you mentioned the course. Can we find those on your site or
Yes.
where?
So you can find a course that Dick and I did online that's, evergreen course. And there's other events and other things on my website.
Awesome. All right, Loch, it was a pleasure. This is intense. I mean, and I mean that in the best possible way.
Yeah.
And I also realize how it's just crazy to think that we could fit something like this in 30 minutes. But I really want to thank you for coming on here and making us aware of what you have going on, because it's exciting. So thank you so much.